Welcome to the Tabletop Gaming Magazine podcast. I'm Chris Eggett, the editor of the magazine, and today I'm joined by Trevor Benjamin and David Thompson, the designers of games like War Chest and Undaunted Normandy, and now Undaunted North Africa. Hi guys.
Hi Chris.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having us.
I'm very well, thank you, yes. How are you both?
Yeah, good. It's 2020. It's an odd year, but it's an odd year for everyone. So getting used to it.
Well, I think you should both be very excited because we've got a really excellent review of Undaunted North Africa coming in the next issue of the magazine, which lands sometime this week, and it got a must play. Which is our highest award that we can possibly offer you. You should be ideally over the moon.
Yeah. Could you imagine how if it would have been a horrible review and we were on the podcast, how awkward it would have been?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, do you know what? I may not have mentioned it, and I may have done something horribly disingenuous.
We really appreciate it. We've been super fortunate so far that all the reviews have been really positive. So that's great.
And so, for those who don't know who are listening to this, Undaunted and the Undaunted series, they're abstract war games, and in my experience, they're abstract war games that you can play while holding a baby. Which I think is probably one of the highest recommendations for like a robustness of a system. But no one ever forgets what they're doing, and everything works, and you can pass a baby back and forth, as I did on my first game of Undaunted North Africa. But we're here to talk about abstract war games as a more general principle. So I wanted to maybe start by asking you both sort of how you approach making these games, I suppose.
So like everything, it depends, right? I will say that generally speaking, Trevor's strength and background is stronger on the abstract side, and mine's stronger on the wargame side, right? So it depends on where we're starting from. I mean, even as simple as War Chest was Trevor's original idea, derived from the core Undaunted system. And Undaunted was my original system, derived from the thematic background, right? So it really just depends on the origin.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. I didn't know their systems were linked, actually. Although thinking about it, I should have known. It
literally was a case of so Undaunted, the core design of that was done, and I just wanted to know, like, okay, what would a game look like if we stripped it down to its core, its absolute core, and built an abstract strategy game around that. And because I'm a huge abstract strategy game fan. I mean, I grew up playing chess and Go and games like this, and then obviously in the modern age, there's lots of great games, and so it was. Yeah. I saw the potential in that system, but David said I'm much more likely to come at things from the perspective of just pure simplicity and abstractness, whereas David needs a rich historical theme to excite him.
Yeah, that's good. And I've realised I've done a terrible thing here, which is I forgot to do the bit where I ask you to introduce yourselves.
It's not too late.
It's not too late. No, it's not. It's not too late. So, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, go on, David.
Yeah. Okay. So David Thompson, like you said, some of the better known games for both of us are Undaunted, Normandy, North Africa, and War Chest. I was fortunate that basically I started into game design around the same time I was meeting Trevor. So we worked together on a lot of things. I mean, I've worked on other things independent of him, but I kind of grew up with him as like, a co-designer throughout, even when it's not something he's designing. The other thing that's hopefully apparent to people who play our games is like we're also extremely good friends, right? So just that's kind of my background. I mean, we could talk forever about other stuff that I've worked on, but those are the things that I'm most proud of, probably, right? And it also reflects like the thing that's most important to me, I think, in gaming is just the people and working with people on fun, creative stuff.
I totally second that. So David and I met about 6 years ago. So you'll notice from our voices, listeners, that we aren't British. But I live in the UK now, and David lived in the UK for 4 years. Was it?
Yeah. Yep. 4 years.
Yeah. So I came here for a woman. So my wife is British, and we spent 10 years traveling around, working and studying, and then we had a baby and needed to land somewhere close to a family, and so we picked the UK. And I met, and then David came here independently for work, and we met, and have been designing games together ever since. I mean, we like David said, we also design games separately from each other. We cheat on each other. So I like there's enough. So we basically met around a really wonderful community of game designers based around Cambridge. Matthew Dunstan, Brett J. Gilbert, Chris Marling, and I mean there's lots more. And so we were a bit incestuous. So I designed a lot of games with Brett. David has designed a few games with Chris. That was far too long an introduction. I apologize.
No, that was great. Thank you.
They just lost half the listeners.
Yes, exactly. At least I didn't talk about growing up playing D&D, so don't worry about that.
Oh, no, we can talk about that later. That's fine. Yes, and that's and also inevitable. This podcast. I don't think an episode of this podcast has gone by without someone saying something to that effect. So
yes, exactly. And then I started playing Magic the Gathering, and then I played Settlers of Catan. Blah, blah. Yes, exactly. So.
That's it. And well, I suppose actually that's a nice way to go into my first question, which is because we're here to talk about abstract war games.
Yes.
But what do we mean by abstract war games? And I think if I can start us off with one, I would say chess. Is that fair?
Yeah, it depends on who you ask, right? So we're walking on minefields here when we talk about anytime you introduce the word war game into a conversation, no one's going to agree with anything we say. So I would say yes, sure, yeah.
Yeah, well, abstract war games at least, because
right.
I think so that there are several kinds of war gaming out there, and I think the abstract. So I suppose there must be two kinds of abstract at least. Then there's your kind of abstract, which is the kind of probably the most fun, I would say, and then there's the other kind of abstract, which is the terrifying amount of tokens. I think that's a lot of people would say that's the other kind of abstract you could go down. I might be talking absolute nonsense there, and then of course there's Warhammer and miniatures gaming itself, that kind of stuff. But yeah, would you like to sort of tell me what abstract wargaming is?
That's fine. We were talking about this right before the call. Go on, David.
Yeah,
you're the most dogmatic, so let's start with you.
Well, I think it's important to let's talk about the certain things. Like we all agree that chess is an abstract game, right? Mm-hmm. We all agree that the old school hex and counter games are war games, right? So those are the kind of two ends of the spectrum where we start. My personal favorite kind of games are what are called waros or war game euros, right? So war games that have a war theme that have Euro game mechanism influence, right? So I think somewhere along that spectrum, all that stuff sort of converges, and anything that's even remotely in that bubble, it meets my criteria of an abstract war game, right? But interestingly, like Trevor said, we were having a discussion. Like he asked, is Small World a waro, a war game euro? And I would say, in my world, it doesn't meet the criteria, because for me, it has to have a real world historical tie, right? Now, a lot of people don't agree with that. Many war gamers, if it's a sci-fi hex and counter game, it's a war game. But if it's Twilight Struggle, it's not, right? So, I mean, we just have to all agree that no one's going to agree on whatever we do.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy with anything in that space. I mean, it's like any definition; it falls apart on scrutiny. So, I think the historicity, if you will, like the historical side, I think is something that a lot of people fall on. And at the end, we're going to come to our sort of our favorites, our top five, and for that, we've explicitly tried to exclude games which aren't at least loosely based in something historical. But I'm happy to call chess an abstract war game. You know, it's not really historical in any sense. I mean, it's an old game and it has a history, but the subject matter isn't trying to simulate any particular type of thing. Whereas most of the games we'll be talking about do to some degree.
So yeah, that's I like that definition there of the historicism, or the I guess it's I always think of it, the biggest part of an abstract war game is giving you the feeling of being in charge of an army, but maybe without the admin of being in charge of an army.
Right.
You know, and I mean that's what I like most about Undaunted and War Chest in particular. So the way I play War Chest and the way War Chest sort of came into my heart is that it fits into a kind of game that me and my brother play. You have sorts of lots of different groups of people you play games with in your life, and I think when you said that it's very obvious that you two are very good friends when you're making a game, that struck something with me there, which is that's maybe one of the things I feel when playing this game, because it's one of those games I can play with my brother, and they are these analytical, very very good for for dueling games. You know, something where there's a lot of push and pull against the other person, but it's not there's not necessarily any take that particularly or anything like that, and mechanically pure as well. So I wondered if you could talk a bit more about abstract war games and like that dueling aspect, maybe.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, for sure, everything you said is true. Now, keep in mind, when I think this is me personally, right? So, when Trevor and I were designing War Chest, we probably played it, I don't know, 300-400 times, maybe minimum, right? Because you have to, because there's so many different variations of the troop combination. So it has to be something that can play, quickly, and it has to be something you want to play with the same person over and over and over.
That's it.
Just if I can tangent real quick, you mentioning playing with your brother. When I came back to the U.S., I visited my family in Georgia on a vacation, and my brother and I, we took all the kids, just me and him, to a trampoline park. And so all the kids were playing on the trampoline park for 3 hours straight. And we played War Chest. He had never played War Chest, so I taught him. And I think we played War Chest probably 12 times in a row. And we played it, and we took it out, and we played it, and we played it, and we played it, and we played it. And
I'm going to tangent too, since I literally did the same thing. So I went home, visited my brother, and we sat down and played War Chest 20 times and Undaunted 20 times. That to me, that's the sign of, I grew up playing all of these games. I grew up playing, like war games and abstracts and Magic the Gathering. All of these games I played with my brother, and it was always that that dueling friend, the friendship of the dueling and and so that has totally influenced the types of games that I make. And so David and I have both sort of have that, and we, so I mean, it also massively helps to make 2-player games, because obviously we do play test with other people, but we can spend the massive amount of development time just working on it ourselves. Now, they're games built out of friendship and
competition.
And competition. Yeah, exactly.
Now, one thing that's important to me, and this is not necessarily true to everybody that likes abstract games, but so my wife doesn't like to play head-to-head combat or abstract games. She says they make her feel stupid, right? She doesn't like Santorini. She doesn't like playing. She'll play War Chest, but those kind of games in general, she's not a huge fan of. I don't like playing games with my brother that have no randomness or variance in it. So I would not want to play chess against my brother. But I think War Chest does a really good job of, there's only a little bit of variance in the game, but the variance that exists allows you to basically say, well, let's play it again, right? Because we're not playing a strictly skill-based game, right? There's just a little bit of randomness in it.
Yeah, and I think that's lovely to hear that you both had the same sort of fraternal experiences, because that's exactly what I did. One Sunday went to see my brother, and we sat there and lost an entire afternoon to it. So that is exactly what happened to me as well on my first session of War Chest. So yeah, as you say, 12 or so games. It's incredible. And I think that's one of the nice things. I try and explain War Chest to people. And I say it's a bit like chess, but you draft your pieces, and then obviously there's the bag building mechanic. And I suppose we should just explain what War Chest is. Actually, would you like to explain what War Chest is, just for our listeners? Because I've run in here because obviously I'm deeply in love with it, and that's not gonna help our listeners understand it at all, is it? So would you like to give a small précis of what War Chest is?
Yeah, sure. So it's a 2 or 4 player game. So I mean, we've been talking about here 2 players, and that's definitely how the core was designed. But you can also play with teams, and essentially each player is abstractly taking on the role of a commander of a medieval army, and each player gets 4 units, and so there's all the classics you would expect: archers, pikemen, and various types of cavalry and various types of infantry, and they all are slightly different. I guess in the same sort of way that the different chess pieces are different, and you build your army at the beginning, and then you play on a board, which is an abstract hex board with a few control points. And essentially, the aim of the game is we start on one side, and you want to run in and grab these control points or take them away from your opponents. And the first person to get some number of them wins. And then the other thing is the bag building mechanic, which is essentially you have a bag. And you have your pieces, and the pieces are not, they're not wooden carved pieces like a chess. They are poker chips, and they represent, and then they show which the unit on one side. And essentially, at the beginning of each round, you pull out some of these, and then you take turns playing one by one. And you can use these poker chips to do a variety of things. Essentially, you can put them on the board to make a unit of that type. So you can put the archer out, and now you have an archer, yay. Or you can play the piece to do something with the matching unit. So I can play if I have an archer on the board, I can play an archer from my hands to move him around or shoot or control a spot that he's on, that sort of thing. And then the final thing you do is you can spend one of these pieces to take another piece and put it into your bag. So you can sort of control what you have available to you. So the more archers I put in my bag, the more often it will come out. So the more often I can use my archer to run around and shoot. So that's it in a nutshell. Yep. Slightly longer than a nutshell, quite a large nutshell. Probably walnuts.
Possibly a coconut.
Coconut. Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
but that is it, and I think that that sort of expresses, when coming back to the dueling aspect, what you do there when you're playing War Chest is you are constantly trying to push against your opponent to find their weak spot on the board, and then also with your configuration of your bag, and then also in your earlier strategic choices of which units you took into the battle itself. The way we played it, we did sort of several different versions of how units are chosen at the start. Sometimes we mulliganed, sometimes we had random draws, all this sort of stuff. So it's a game that opens itself up to lots of different ways of play. But yes, that dueling aspect sort of comes down to that pushing against each other in some way, and I think that's something we see in Undaunted as well. Which is, and one of the things I wrote in the North Africa review is that it is very objective focused. And I wondered if you could sort of talk about the way abstract games using these objectives sort of give us that feeling of pushing against each other, because it's not a feeling you get in every game. You don't always get the feeling of because take that games feel very nasty sometimes, and Eurogames often don't feel like you're even playing a game with other people. That's cruel of me, but it's very jolly. But you can have a very nice time, but you don't often feel like you're in competition in a direct sense, because they're low conflict or no conflict. So would you be able to talk to me about how you get that feeling of pushing against each other?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that we made a very conscious decision of in both games is we did not want the goal of the game to be to kill each other, right?
That's good. Yeah.
So if you play either of them, now there are a couple of scenarios in Undaunted, Normandy, where you have to pin the opponent, meaning take their tokens off, or in North Africa the same. But those are the exception rather than the rule. And we wanted, if you're going to have combat in the game, it's because it's a means to, you have to do it en route to controlling, right? So we knew from the start in both games that we wanted the goals to not be conflict itself.
Yeah.
So that was one very important thing. I will say that in War Chest, if I'm remembering correctly, and this has been a year since we worked on this, Trevor, correct me if I'm wrong, we probably spent more time getting the board control composition, meaning how many control points there are and where they are. That was probably the most challenging thing we had, right?
Yeah. Getting the goal right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the last, whatever it was, 6 months of the design was just grinding through all of the units, because there's 16 units, and so it's getting the balance right. But definitely we spent longer on getting the objective right.
Yeah.
Just to bring it back away from War Chest more generally, is that the reason why my take is the reason why Take That feels weird, has a different feeling than conflict games, is that it's the objective of the game is there's a pie and I need to get a percentage of that pie, and that's how I win, right? That's what I'm doing. Whereas a lot of things that you classify as Take That is, we're doing something else, and then every once in a while I'll just sort of randomly, slap you or take one of your things.
Yeah.
So it's you can't play a game like chess and then complain that someone's taking your pieces. It's that's what the game is. And you cannot like that sort of game, and lots of people don't. That's perfectly fine, but it's not. We're each working on our own little project, and every once in a while the game tells me to interfere with you. It's no, our projects are aligned and opposed. It's I need to do this and you need to do the same thing, or you need to stop from doing this thing. So I think that's why anyway, I think that's a key part of it.
Yeah, I think that sounds right to me. And that phrase you used there, aligned and opposed. I think that's a really elegant way of saying kind of what's at the heart of these games, which is that you are. So it's a really hard thing for me to articulate what I like about it. So that's why I'm obviously coming to you to tell me the secrets. But yes, it comes back. I guess it comes back to that whole sort of brotherly conflict thing we were talking about earlier. Should we talk about abstraction in general? Because some people bounce off it, don't they? The idea of playing an abstract game. Why do you think that is?
I think maybe because it just doesn't. There's not something from maybe familiar with them, or doesn't resonate in some way, right? That interests them. I mean, I do like abstract games, but I can understand why a person would go into it and say, there's nothing here that there's no touchstone for me, right? Or there's no familiar element. And so it just might not evoke any sort of emotional response from them.
I think even when it comes to something like explaining how the rules of a game, if there's, and I guess it's what they call it, no touchstone, if you have nothing to tie it to, then you're just learning rules, right? And so, you just have to learn how the bishop moves in chess, right? There's diagonal has nothing to do with being a bishop, right? There's nothing there. Whereas a game which has rules which are integrated with its theme, or like then a lot of it just sort of comes for free. I mean, you still have to learn it, obviously, but it makes that a lot easier, and it makes it a lot more approachable, I think, to a lot of people.
I think too, I mean, if you think about modern abstract games, also not like chess and Go, but like modern games, if we're like, let's say we're play testing a game and somebody brings a game to play test, and it's an abstract game, and it's clearly like you can basically like see the numbers and the rules in front of you, and it's very transparent. Like that's not engaging. But if you think about modern abstract games that have done well, like an Azul, like that's obfuscated, right? And so I think that I think some people appreciate the pure abstract, right? Like they like to see that. But for a game to truly transcend to a broad audience, I think you have to obfuscate the abstraction to some extent.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right, and I think also coming back to your point, Trevor, that it's a thing I feel it's like a thesis I'm working on or something. That theme is the thing people fall back on when the rule book doesn't work for them. You know, because they're like, oh, is it right that this thing trades for this? Yes, that makes sense. Or that we discard this card after it's used and things like that, because it's it's the kind of thing that would be discarded in the scenario that fits with the theme. You know, I think those things work really nicely. I guess that's why the Undaunted series using the historical theme works so well. Should we talk about North Africa?
Sure.
So, I'm going to do the stupid thing of asking you, what is it?
What is Undaunted in general, or North Africa?
North Africa. Yeah.
North Africa. Yeah. So North Africa obviously is the sequel to Undaunted Normandy, right? So it's the standalone sequel. So second game in the series. Undaunted Normandy, just briefly for people, it was all about platoon level combat. So if you don't know anything about wars, we're really talking war games. We're talking about groups of like 30 to 40 guys, right? That's what it's simulating. North Africa takes a much more scaled in view, right? So literally you're working with a group of 5 or 6 guys. So it's a much more like commando feel, if you will, right? From that perspective. And one player takes the role of what's called the Long Range Desert Group, which was a Commonwealth unit, mostly New Zealanders, British, Indians, South Rhodesians. They were working together in North Africa, operating behind enemy lines. And so we joined them towards the beginning of the war. So Italy is their adversary. So it's early on in North Africa. So one side plays the Commonwealth and one side plays the Italians.
And it's and it uses a deck building system.
So 2 things real quick, and I'll turn it over to Trevor to elaborate. So one thing I just noticed when Trevor described War Chest, he broke it down purely mechanically, and when I described Undaunted, there was not a mechanical element in that entire description.
Yeah, I know. And it's absolutely hilarious because, like, I mean, I know all of the details that David just gave, but if you were to ask me to describe, it's terrible. So you describe it in North Africa, I would have been like, there's some guys, and no, I'm joking, but it's. So just to be clear, David is absolutely the history guy in this partnership, and I did my due diligence. Like when we were working on North Africa, like I got some books and I did read about it, and so I have certainly some of the background knowledge. But anyway, so that's what Undaunted North Africa is from the perspective of the theme and the story, not the story. I mean, it's actually history. So but that's the situation that you are in, and in terms of the system, so it's there's you played over a series of scenarios, and each of these scenarios represents a different encounter between the LRDG and the Italians. And we recommend that you work your way through the scenarios, but they are totally standalone. And in each scenario, basically it will tell you what the goals of the two sides are, and these vary from controlling spots on the board, to escaping off of the board, to blowing things up, to there's a variety of different goals. So essentially it also tells you then which soldiers you have at your disposal. And like David said, each side has between 3 and 6 or 7 different individuals. And they start in specific spots, but then they're controlled by a deck of cards. And so you have a starting deck, right? So the initial cards, and generally it's a few cards of each of the soldiers that you have. But one of the things you can do, similar to War Chest, is you can add new cards into your deck, right? And the way you do that is by using command cards, and so these represent off-board, squad leaders, and God, here I'm already falling apart. David, give me the names of the people.
On the LRDG side, you have warrant officers, you have the lieutenant, right?
Exactly.
Staff sergeant, yeah.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And so they can be used to add new cards into your deck, which again allows you to, it changes the frequency with which you'll be able to activate those particular soldiers. And there's a relatively streamlined combat system. But one of the cool things is when you get hit, when one of your soldiers gets hit, you lose a card from that soldier in your deck. And then when the last card is gone from the deck, then that soldier is has been wounded or killed, and they're out. So that's the basic shtick. And then what we've added in North Africa is a few different things. There's quite a bit more asymmetry in terms of the goals, in terms of the soldiers available. So there are just the two sides are quite different. And then the other thing we've added is vehicles, which wasn't in the original game. And this is probably it's funny because this was the big thing. But I think in terms of the reviews that we're seeing so far and initial comments of the people, the asymmetry is what people are as excited about as the vehicles. But the vehicles are, it's pretty abstract. It's streamlined the way they work. But essentially, you have a vehicle, which is an off-board card, a small card, and it has some seats, and you can put your soldiers into the seats in the vehicle, and then those seats have different actions associated with them. So if you're in the driver's seat, then you can drive the vehicle. If you're in the seat with the big gun, you can fire the big gun, that sort of thing. And you can jump in and out of the vehicles. So it's quite sort of, it does evoke that sort of commando feel, and that was very much intentional from the beginning. We wanted to still focus on the individuals, but have them running around, jumping in and out, the vehicles are getting blown up and, crawling out from the wreckage and all that sort of thing. That was definitely what we were trying to evoke. Anyway, that's more than a nutshell again. So,
yeah. So, that's Undaunted North Africa. It's interesting what you brought up there about asymmetry being picked up on so much, because it is really nice. You have to focus on your own strengths. You're kind of led by the scenario, and it's all about managing your deck to make sure that you've got the right thing that's going to push against what your opponent's going to do. The abstract combat there, you're sort of asking people to make choices about whether they're going sort of long-term choices versus short-term choices. I wondered if you want to speak on that briefly in terms of how that differs from maybe other kinds of game.
Most of the times in a scenario, you start with like one card per counter on the board. And if you lose all your cards, the counter is going to come off. And in North Africa, it can never come back on. But you can add as many as 4 cards to a guy, right? Mm-hmm. So if you really have one guy that's super important, you'll probably deck build that guy. He'll add a bunch of cards, and that means he's going to be going a lot. One thing that I'm really proud of, if I can tangent real quick, is, in certain games, in a war game, like a proper war game, old school war game, you represent things like the efficacy of a unit through things like just giving it a higher number or whatever it is. And one thing that comes out organically in Undaunted is if a guy is, important, if he's your most important guy, then he's going to have this ability to produce more firepower organically by deck building him, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a nice aside to it. So one thing you're going to be doing is building the deck towards the guy who's the default most important or whatever, because you don't want to lose him and you need him to go. Your opponent has a lot of different things they can do to you. So they can do things like gumming up your deck with Fog of War cards to try to reduce the efficiency of your deck. They can also just directly attack your guy. Now, if there's anything that's frustrating to brand new gamers of Undaunted, it would be this sometimes people have a tendency to just never advance their guys and just shoot constantly. And you're rolling a 10-sided dice and you're just hoping for to roll a 9 or a 10, right? Which is just not likely to happen. So the game definitely promotes you managing your deck and you maneuvering into advantageous positions and then playing the odds, right? So in the game, without going into a bunch of detail, there are options like suppressing. So I can roll 4 dice to try to target a guy, drastically increasing the odds, but I'm just slowing him down. I'm not taking a card out. So throughout the game, you're going to make all these tough decisions about, is it more important for me to advance my guy right now and leave him vulnerable, or to make a suppression shot to slow my opponent down with a high probability, but he's not going to remove a card? Is it more important for me to just remove the guy altogether from my own deck, right? So you have all these choices about efficiency of your deck, efficiency of your opponent's deck, and then weighing that with the luck of the dice, right? Because at the end of the day, for you to hit somebody, you're going to have to roll dice at some point.
So shall we do your top 5?
Sure. Yeah.
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 Now, are these? Would you like to introduce the top 5?
The Tabletop Gaming Game Store is open and dispatching orders worldwide. Visit www.tabletopgaming.co.uk to read the reviews and buy the games directly from us.
So these are games that all share, I would say the thing that these games share is a historical/war element to them. And they are all over the spectrum in terms of, some are abstract, some are war games, some are, you'll kind of see. But these, I would just say that all of these games clearly fall into the bucket of having either a war or historical element to them.
Okay, so this is your top 5 war games? Is that what we're going for?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
war
but
yeah.
But they all share, again, to varying degrees, that abstract nature. None of these are full on old school hexen. I gotta stop saying old school. That's derogatory. But old, like full on simulationist games.
If you know the term grognard, right? None of these are grognard games. Every one of these games would appeal to a broad board game audience, not just war game audience. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're all very careful in what elements, they're trying to simulate and what ones they're not. Like they focus in on a subset of the possible things which could have been focused on to represent that particular conflict or whatever. Yeah. Okay. So we overlap in 3, is that right? And then we each had our own wild card one. So go on.
Oh, excellent.
Okay. So first of all, before we start, I want to squeeze in 2 honorable mentions. Can I do that?
Yeah, of course you can. Yes.
Okay.
I think we're getting close to a top 10, and that sounds great. So
by the time it's done, we'll have a top 50.
Yeah, that's it. Perfect.
So two that I want to mention are really systems more than they are specific games. So one is Academy Games has what they call their Birth of America series. So that's, if people know them, 1775, 1812, 1754. They also have 878 Vikings, which is the Viking invasion of England. So that's a really, really good, highly recommended if you like what's called a Ameritride, like combat games, if you like dudes on a map, if you like war games, if you like Euros, it scratches a lot of those itches.
Yeah.
And it has something that I love. It's a team game, right? So at its best, it's played with 4 players, 2 versus 2. So all of those games are fantastic. So highly recommended. The other one is the other system is Quartermaster General.
Oh,
so
yes,
there's
there
Quartermaster General, for World War One, Two. I mean, if you name it, it's maybe we have it, even the Cold War. So, I would call it a prototypical war game Euro hybrid, right?
Mm-hmm.
So war theme, but very much Euro mechanisms driving it.
Yeah.
So those are 2 that didn't make the list, but are my honorary mentions. All right, well, those are my 2 honorary. So I guess we're ready to start our proper top 5,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, Trevor, you want me to go first? Is that right?
Yeah, go on. I mean, have we actually ranked them?
No, we never ranked them. So this is not us copping out. This is legitimately 5 games, no rank.
Okay. Yes. I think we've only had a couple of guests on who've given us a top 5 where they've committed to saying there's a number 1 and a number 5.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll start with our individuals first. So my individual, I'm 13 Days. I don't know if you know 13 Days. It is a card-driven game. So if people aren't familiar with card-driven games, it specifically means a game that has, you play the cards to take actions. There's almost always 2 parts of the card. One part is command points that gives you points to spend to do things, and the other is like an event. Oftentimes, if you play it for the event, your opponent might get to do something in return, etc. So these are popular sub-genre of war games. They have a lot of Euro crossovers. And so 13 Days is my favorite type of game because it packs all of that into about 30 minutes, maybe even less if you know what you're doing. So there's a lot of those that I would recommend. Watergate's a new one, too, if people have heard about Watergate. But 13 Days is my favorite. Fantastic.
That sounds fabulous.
Okay. My wild card was published in 1959. It is Diplomacy. So it is the classic game of okay, look, I'll say for you, those people who don't know it, it is a 7-player game. I mean, you can play it with fewer. You can play it with 6. 6 is okay. 5 is anything lower than it just falls apart. And it is historical. It starts in the spring of 1901, so basically is the lead up to the First World War. And it's a map of Europe at the time, and each player plays one of the powers. And then it is a game of diplomacy and backstabbing, and it's the game that ruins friendships. And it's also about 7 hours long, and you can effectively be eliminated in the first round. But all of that, given all of that, it's beautiful. It is so incredibly streamlined and simple. Essentially, there's 2 types of units. You got land units and sea units, and at the beginning, and this is the brilliant thing. Each round, you basically, it's a bit fiddly, but it was 1959. They didn't know about other options. You write down for each of your units what it's going to do, and the actions are simple, like move into here or support someone else, which basically protects them, or support someone moving into another place. And that's it. And then every other round, so you have the spring and the fall, and in the fall, you check to see there's control spots on the board. And then you see who controls those control spots, and the objective is to control a certain number of them, either on your own or most likely in a alliance of some sort. But the whole game, it's all done simultaneously. That's the brilliance of it. So the whole game is you spend 15, 20 minutes wheeling and dealing, backroom negotiations, making promises, and then everyone writes down what they're actually going to do, and then you reveal them one by one, and people cry, and it's absolutely brilliant. And this game, I mean, that simultaneous that simultaneity it's beautiful. And then of course that has been used in more modern games. I mean, I'm trying to think of other historical games which have used it, and nothing is jumping to mind. David probably knows like 30, but certainly like a Game of Thrones, that's sort of a recent-ish game that uses that sort of simultaneous thing. And again, it builds on the all of this intrigue and negotiation and backstab. And yeah, I love it. I played it, 50 times in my sort of teenage years. and we absolutely loved it. But you need a whole day, and a lot of friends.
Yeah. I do like anything where it asks everyone to commit at once and also allows for a great deal of negotiation. Because I really like people making soft deals that then lead to one of them very badly getting. I'm trying to think of the polite way to say something over, but I'm always a big fan of that. So yes. So what do we have next?
So I realized after I did mine, Trevor, I think I cheated because you played 13 Days in Watergate, right?
Yeah.
So that should have been our joint one. So that was one of our joint.
I'm happy to throw those on my list. Both of them are great.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you want to add anything to that my description of those that I missed?
I mean, well,
that class of games.
No, no. I mean, if you want to get pedantic, as I was when we discussed this last time, David. I mean, Nixon. Watergate isn't a war game, but it uses that same system, which it's historically rooted conflict.
Yep.
So there you go. Fine.
Yeah.
But
So this should have been my actual one that I played and Trevor hasn't. Sorry. So Sakagahara. So this is, in my opinion, so I love block war games. Okay, so let's talk about what is a block war game. So it's literally a block, typically of wood, with some stuff on it facing you that your opponent can't see, and then throughout the course of the game, that's revealed, right? So it's a great fog of war mechanism for games.
Think Stratego.
Stratego, yeah. And you know what's funny is what was I listening to today? I was listening to somebody, and they were putting down the games they played as a child. They're like, oh yeah, I played Monopoly and and Stratego. And I was like, don't put down Stratego. Stratego's a fantastic game. Talk about a great abstract war game, right? Yeah. So anyway, so Sakagahara, Unification of Japan. So fantastic war game, really good, both the block element of it itself, the hidden information of the units, as well as some really interesting card play and combat resolution mechanisms. So fantastic. I would say it is one of the two best games to get you into block war games if you're interested. The other one being Hammer of the Scots, which is harder to get a hold of. So best, in my opinion, the best entry into the block war game genre.
That sounds really good. That's something I haven't tried actually, but it does sound quite intriguing to me.
No, it's great. Yep, I love it.
Yeah, fabulous. What do we have next?
Blitzkrieg. There you go. So Blitzkrieg. Yeah. So this is a game that David. Here's how much David loves this game. So David brought this game with him to Germany. So we went to the Essen Game Fair last year, and he brought the game with him. And the largest game fair in the entire world. It's probably 5,000 new games, and David's like, dude, we have to play this game. So he basically sat down in the corner and grinded out 6-7 games in a row. Something like that. Okay, so it's brilliant. It's brilliant. So essentially, it claims to be World War II in 20 minutes, and it's abstract, which obviously we have no problem with given the topic of the podcast. But it's so essentially you have a board which it abstractly represents the various areas. They call the theaters, the various theaters of the war, and it's really, really clean. Where you have each player has a bag of tokens, and you have a small hand of them, and you take turns placing them out onto the board to try to control these different theaters. And I mean, we won't go into the details, but there's essentially a few really clever. It's really clever, really pure, but it does a really good job to evoke, I think, elements of that conflict, and it's just brilliant. It's so much fun.
I think for what it's worth, I would argue it. I don't think it really evokes World War II personally, but I don't care if right? It's just so brilliant. It was my favorite game of last year. First of all, we should say it's a Palomori design, and I'm a Palomori fanboy, like big time.
Yeah.
I think Ethnos is another brilliant game.
Mm-hmm.
It's and PSC is the publisher for that too. So PSC is getting a lot of shout outs. But I mean, it's just like Trevor said, it's just an unbelievably brilliant. I would call it a abstract territory, whatever you want to call it. What do you call it?
Area control.
Area control. Yeah, area control or area influence. But I mean, it might not evoke World War II, right? Like it's super, it's beyond abstract, but I don't care because it's so brilliant.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the pitch is just so powerful, isn't it? World War II in, is it 20 minutes or is it 15 minutes? I can't remember.
Yeah, 20, it claims 20 minutes, and it's easy. I mean, it's not lying, right?
Yeah.
It's
which is great.
You can get it below that.
Yeah. So what are we following up Blitzkrieg with?
Okay, so the last game is A Few Acres of Snow.
Oh, good. Okay.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, for me, there's a lot of reasons personally. Like, it was the game that introduced me to the concept of deck building, right? Because I came to the board game hobby relatively recently. So, probably 2012, 13 is when I started playing modern games. So, it was, first of all, I love the French and Indian War as a conflict. It probably second just to the World War II as far as of interest to me. It has deck building, but it has deck building in a way that is what we tried to do with Undaunted and War Chest, which tied deck building as the enabling mechanic tied to spatial elements, right? So it's kind of the combination of that, right? Like this genius mechanic that you can do all sorts of really cool abstractions of reality that people don't have to know about, right? Like if you start to really diving into it, like, oh, that makes sense. I understand what, fog of war, blah, 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 but they don't have to understand that. So yeah, I think it's just that combination of the period, the deck building mechanism, and the spatial play of the game.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a bit embarrassing, but I first played this game last summer. So I mean, I've known about this game essentially since it was released, and it was, I knew from the moments I first read about it, it'd be a game that I would love. But yeah, it was only this past summer that I got to play it. And not surprisingly, I played with my brother on a trip home. And we sat down and played it 4 or 5 times. So it's brilliant. And it's, I mean, so I'm from New Brunswick, the east coast of Canada. So, like it is literally situated in the part of the world where I'm from, so that has a bit of an extra love for me. But yeah, just that. I mean, so I did play deck builders before that. I mean, I played Dominion the year it came out, and I was smitten with it for years and years and years, and I've loved deck building ever since. But yeah, it was definitely one of these games which first cemented the idea that deck building can just be a part of a game, right? Like that it's a sort of an enabling element to do something else. And I mean, that's standard now, right? Like it's pretty standard now, but I think it was probably, if not the first, then one of the first games to do that. And and it just did it so brilliantly. And yeah, it's just a really engaging game.
One real quick aside for people that are interested, like if you know about Few Acres of Snow, if you're interested or whatever, one thing we should say is there's a game called Hands in the Sea that is designed by somebody else. So Few Acres of Snow designed by Martin Wallace. I don't know how easy it is to get a hold of a copy of it now, because I don't know if Tree Frog Games is. I mean, they don't exist anymore, so I don't know if somebody else is publishing it. Or I don't know what the status of Few Acres of Snow is. But Hands in the Sea. The designers openly credit Few Acres of Snow as being the inspiration, and it is essentially the same game. I think it's set in the Peloponnesian Wars, though. Yeah. So different theater, very similar mechanics, and some people would argue that it's more mechanically sound. I've played them both. I like them both. So just to let people know, if you're interested in that game, check out Hands in the Sea also.
Well, that's very good. That's thank you for that. That's especially if people are looking for these things and they can't find them. It's a bit of a quality of life. There, thank you. Yeah, is that our top 5?
I think so. I mean, it was our top something.
Yeah. That's great. Okay.
Can I do, before we do plugs? I'm going to do a plug, but not for one. Can I? Since we did discuss abstracts, like Go and chess, I'm just going to throw one in there. And this is one of my absolute favorite games of all time, and I will defend it to the end of the earth.
Yeah.
And it's Hey, That's My Fish. Has anyone played that?
I've not played Hey, That's My Fish. That sounds.
I have played it. Are you trying to say it's an abstract war game? Is that what you're saying?
It's okay. It is historically based. Penguins fighting over. Okay, so it's an abstract game, and it is a territory control. Like it's a conflict. It is a conflict game, and it is beautiful. It is. Okay. Essentially, it's one of these games which could have been designed, 100 years, thousands of years ago. So probably, okay. So essentially, you have a hexagon tiles which show 1, 2, or 3 fish on them, and each player has some penguins. And it actually plays 2, 3, or 4 players. But in a 2-player game, you each have 4 penguins. You basically shuffle these tiles up and build an iceberg from them. So that's the play area. And then you each, I can literally explain the whole rules. So you take turns putting your 4 penguins out, and then each turn you get to move one of your penguins, and you can move it as far as you want in any of the 6 directions. You can't move through other penguins, and this is where it gets cool. So once you've moved the penguin, you take the tile that the penguin was on, and you take it off. So it creates a hole in the iceberg, and you take that, and however many fish were on it, that's how many points you get. And so essentially, then you just keep going. You can never jump over these holes that get made. So basically, it's a beautifully simple territory control game, and it teaches you, like, because I'm a huge Go fan, it teaches you so many of the basics of a game like Go, but it does it with a really, really cute and evocative and theme. It's even simpler, and like I play with my kids. Like I started playing with the kids when they were. I just played with my 4-year-old son yesterday, and obviously he doesn't get any depth out of it, but the rules are simple enough that he can just myopically focus on getting the big fish with 3 on them, and not worry about the sort of the territorial, like, blocking off sections and then hoovering them all up at the end. But it's brilliant. Yeah. So there you go. Plug for what? Yeah, it's absolutely one of my favorite games of all time, and it's brilliant, and it's still in print. Fantasy Flight have a version out, so you can actually find it. Like you can find it in, like I've seen it in toy shops and these sorts of things. So it's out there and it's beautiful.
So this is a little bit like and now I've not played it. I've not played this game, but I have it reported to me from several sources that the most ruthless game to play with other people is apparently Echidna Shuffle.
I don't know that.
Well, it's I think it's a similar thing of moving about a play area, and you play these. I think you play the bugs on the kind of hedgehoggy things, but it's one of those games that it says 4+ on the box for the age rating or whatever. But apparently the reports I heard were of people gathering around tables at Essen and things like that to really get into it, because like they've it's the best 2 out of 5 or 2 out of 5, 2 out of 3 or whatever it is. So yes, I think there's a whole genre of kids games that are actually perfect games of conflict, which I like.
Yep.
One thing I'll say, following up on Trevor's, hey, that's my fish. Yeah, hey, that's my fish. Is for all your listeners, we're going to spoil the next Undaunted expansion. It's called Undaunted March of the Penguin.
That's it.
All penguin conflict. But you heard it here first.
That's it. Thank you for that exclusive. Fabulous. Cool. So, thank you both for coming on. And I think we need to ask the question I always have to ask, which is, what's next?
What are we allowed to talk about, David? So, essentially, so we've got for War Chest. So War Chest came out 2018. We had an expansion for it last year. Nobility, it was called.
Yeah.
And we have a new expansion coming out later this year. It should be in autumn at some point, fall, depending on where listeners are from. And it's called Siege. I don't know how much David's. I'm going to look at David. No. How much are we allowed to spoil?
I think that based on what's been revealed so far, we can confirm that there's siege weapons and there are fortifications.
Oh, excellent!
You can say that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. There you go. It has siege weapons and fortifications.
Fortifications.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, could you reveal how many new units we get?
Four. Yeah, four new units and another like new mechanism, right? So just like nobility, like we introduced like a new. So in this case, that'll be the fortifications. It's kind of the new mechanism, and then 4 units that you can probably guess are mechanically and thematically tied to that. I think the original intent had been to release it at Essen, right? So I think it's they're planning around that time, right?
Yeah. So October sort of time. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
Cool. There's Europe Divided is coming soon. We know that.
Yeah. So Europe Divided is a game that I designed with Chris Marling. So we previously had worked on a game called Armageddon that was published by Queen. Europe Divided is published by Phalanx. It is post-Cold War political control over Central and Eastern Europe and the Caucasus by Russia and Western Europe. So one player takes on the role of the EU and NATO. The other one takes on the role of Russia, and you're trying to vie for influence over, like I said, Central and Eastern Europe. That is out now in Europe, but there's distribution issues in the U.S. due to COVID-19. So I think it's on pre-order everywhere.
That looks really good. I'm hoping to get my hands on a copy soon.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think, obviously we talked about North Africa. Trevor and I can say that we delivered the design for the next game in the Undaunted series to Osprey. And I guess we can say that somebody spoiled on BGG. Can we say that?
Technically, if you want to just go on BGG and look for the thread, So the next one is called Reinforcements. That's all we can say.
Oh my
God. And we are starting on the next one. That's definitely, we can't say anything more about it than that.
Of course.
I'll just quickly plug. So I have a couple. The other person I work the most with on games is Brett J. Gilbert. Brett Gilbert. He just lives up the road from me, in fact. And last year we had an Essen release with White Goblin Games. They're a Dutch publisher, and it's called Maya. It's a tile laying game. So it is abstract, and it is territory control. So it's very much conflicty in that sense. And we have a couple expansions coming out for that later this year. And so that focused on the geography, focused on the sort of the peninsula as a whole. And now each of these expansions zooms in on one of the cities, and then adds a bunch of. So there's a new board, and then adds new elements, and these are all little modules which can be mixed and matched. I'll go back to a tiny bit of history here. So I grew up. I came into Euros sort of, in the era of Catan and Carcassonne, so in the early days. And I don't know what has happened to Euros, but in the early days, Euros were brutal and they were interactive and El Grande. Carcassonne is nasty. Yeah. It's beautiful. And somehow that's a whole nother podcast we can talk about.
Are we doing a double header? Is that what?
Yeah, exactly.
we're doing let's set the Euros to right.
Yeah, exactly. No, but basically, so this game Maya is a love letter, if you will, to games of that era, which is it's lots of direct player interaction. There you go.
Yeah, that sounds great. I like the modular element there, which I think is something I feel I'm seeing more in Euros. designers putting this was it Miyabi by Michael Kisling.
Oh yeah,
That comes with like 5 expansions in the box, and it's one of those things like, well, clearly you made this quite complicated game and then chopped a load of bits off and left them in the box. And it's really nice because it means you can do that thing, that kind of actually that war chesty thing of deciding, oh no, we're going to play it again, but with this other expansion that involves a frog jumping up the hill as well, or whatever else it is, So I'm a big fan of any sort of modular elements.
So that's it for stuff. So I've just, I guess there's one last thing, another game with Brett that's just come out from Blue Orange Games. It's called Piece of Pie. Oh. So it's not conflict at all. It's a family game that is each player. It's a drafting game. So you build some pies out of these nice. It's they did a beautiful job on the production. It looks like a pie box. It's got a clear front, so you can look in and see the pieces. And you build some pies out in the center of the table, and then you take turns cutting slices out and taking them, making your own pie. And then you're trying to do pattern matching and essentially just build the best pie that you can. So yeah, again, it's very much aimed at a different audience than Undaunted North Africa, I'd say. Yeah, it's fun. It's interesting because this is like my sort of my first foray into that sort of space, and so seeing the reviews that are coming out, these are coming from these. It's only been released in America now, and it's coming, and it's being sold into the toy market. So, which is cool. And so seeing these reviews coming in from these people, like, I have no idea who these reviewers are, because if you look on BGG, there's there's like 8 ratings or something, and it's like, well, I know the game's selling, so clearly it's not. Speaking about abstraction, to wrap it all up, I guess, is you can't have rules complexity. It's just cannot do it. And so you really have to rip out everything or start from nothing. Either it depends on how you want to come at it, but you need something that presents itself, right? Yes. Like just you flop the bits on the table and you can essentially play from just intuition, right? It's one of the weird things about games. Like there aren't many consumer products in the world where you actually have to take out a piece of paper and read it to understand what to do. Like it's just
we still have a lot of front loading, don't we?
Yes, exactly. And so when you're competing with the rest of the products in the world, like it's a hard sell for some people. So you have to if you want to compete with things that do their things themselves, then you have to really strip it out. It's a fun design challenge, and it's just a different. So anyway, that's it. That's it for me.
I'm going to move through these super fast because I know we're running long and people don't want to hear us talk about ourselves. So
I think they might do.
When I'm not working with Trevor, I'm usually working on solitaire war games or war games that have a solitaire thing to them. So coming out next month, I've got 2 different war games. One is called For What Remains, which is a post-apocalyptic skirmish level war game. That's actually head-to-head or solitaire, right? There's a solitaire option. And the funny thing about that game is I originally started designing that about 15 years ago before I even knew modern board games existed, right? So very strange. Like the influences are like things like Blood Bowl and D&D and Final Fantasy Tactics and stuff like I had no even concept of modern board games existed. So
that's so good. Okay, I need to play this.
So that's so it's gone through massive revision to like modernize the game, but yeah, that's where its origin is. And then I have a game called By Stealth and Sea coming out next month, which is Italian human torpedo operators. So literally guys who would ride torpedoes from a submarine to a target ship, so a British ship in port during World War II, and they would then take a mine off the torpedo, attach it to the target ship, and blow it up. Right. So believe it or not, that was a thing. So here's what's interesting. This is how.
That part wasn't interesting, obviously.
So here's what's mind blowing about this. So in the port of Alexandria, right, the British had their 2 battleships at the time in the Mediterranean. So, 2 of the best ships they had during World War II in the Mediterranean. And the Italians managed to basically damage both of them to the point where they couldn't be used. So they knocked out 2 British battleships with 6 guys riding torpedoes. That's a pretty good rate of return right there. So it's a campaign-based game where you take control of all these operators, and you're managing like tech upgrades and their campaign experience and all this kind of stuff. So again, that's solitaire. You can play it co-op, but it's really designed to be solitaire. And then the last thing, and I don't know exactly what the time of this is, but I'm working with Rebellion. So people in the UK probably know Rebellion, right? Video games, comics, etc. They've started a board game division. Oh, cool. And so I'm working with the main guy there, Duncan, who previously was with Osprey, to design the Sniper Elite board game. So it's a board game based on the video game Sniper Elite.
Can you reveal anything of what that might entail?
Well, I mean, so we did public demos at the PAX Unplugged. So it's been a while, right? Because of everything else, so we would have demoed it as we can't. Obviously, those conventions aren't there. And the Kickstarter, I don't know when it'll run. It was going to run earlier this year, but COVID-19 delayed it. So it's a hidden movement game where one player takes on the role of the sniper, and they're moving around. And this is a co-design with a guy named Roger Tankersley, who's a good buddy of mine, but also a coworker. He loves hidden movement games. So once I kind of settled him, that was the core mechanism. I brought him in, and so he's been hugely influential. But we specifically set out to do things like, you can play a game like many of the hidden movement games, there's periods of like long periods where you don't really know what's going on and the tension kind of dies out and you're just trying to find somebody. And so we've tried to strip that out as much as possible, right? So it's like 45 minutes of pure hidden movement tension was our target here. So and plus the sniper gets to shoot people, so he's not just moving around, right? He's killing people, and, so.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. That sounds great as well. These all hit my buttons. So it sounds like we've got some really good stuff coming up. Okay, well, thank you very much to both of you for coming on. Would you want to plug where we can find you online or anything like that?
I'm on Twitter. So my Twitter is @djackthompson, or on Board Game Geek, right? So anybody can just go to Board Game Geek, find me, and geek mail me. Those are probably the 2 easiest ways to get a hold of me.
Yeah, same for me. So I'm @Trevor M Benjamin on Twitter, and then just look for Trevor Benjamin on BGG.
Lovely, great. Thank you both for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks. It was a lot of fun. Thanks a lot.
Cheers. Thanks. Thank you for listening. Our intro music is Cloud Meetings by Body on the Thames, which you can find at bodyontheThames.bandcamp.com. You can find us on tabletopgaming.co.uk. You can find us on Twitter at tabletopmag, on Facebook as Tabletop Gaming Magazine. You can find us on Instagram at tabletop_gaming_magazine. And we've just launched a Twitch channel, which you can find at twitch.tv/tabletopgamingmag. If you like the show, recommend it to a friend, or subscribe to the magazine, which you can do on our website.